Welcome to the Teachers Talkin' podcast, hosted by Dustin and Ghazali Abdul Wahab. In this podcast, we discuss all things education and teaching, from innovative teaching methods to challenges to strategies and much, much more. In this discussion or roundtable-based podcast, we bring in educators from all around the world to talk about a variety of education topics so that we can support as many teachers as possible. We want this to be a place of inspiration, personal and professional development, and simply a place where we can elevate education together. Welcome to Teachers Talkin'. Welcome to another episode of Teachers Talkin'. I am Dustin here with my co-host Ghazali, and we are absolutely thrilled to be back in season 2. Today we are excited to welcome Ginean Royal from Equipped Educator. Ginean is passionate about supporting and empowering new teachers to find their footing in the classroom. And the episode title for this one is Building Confidence, Empowering Beginning Teachers to Teach Like Veterans. And we're going to focus on answering an overarching question of how can beginning teachers build confidence and develop the skills they need so they can teach like veteran educators. So, Ginean, thank you so much for being with us. Before we dive into the discussion, would you just tell us a little bit about yourself, your background in education, and maybe a little bit about Equipped Educator?
Great. Thank you, Dustin. Thank you, Ghazali. I am a 24-year educator. I've been teaching for 24 years, and the past year I've been an instructional coach. So I work with the teachers, and the bulk of my job is working with beginning teachers. So those 0 through 3, year teachers. That's who I work with the most. And that's what my biggest passion is. I've taught elementary school, I've taught middle school, I've taught high school, I've taught post-secondary. So I've taught the gambit of it. So I enjoy most of my time teaching, mostly high school, but a lot of it was also middle school. But I enjoy working with the beginning teachers. That seems to be my passion because when I was a beginning teacher, I didn't go through the normal structure through teacher education. So I was what we called back then a lateral entry teacher. They call it residency in our state, and it's something different everywhere. But my undergrad was not in education. So you basically got pushed in the pool and say swim. So I remember that very well. And I just was like, at least if I went through teacher education, you had student teaching. But I didn't have that. So I wonder how others felt in that position. And the more I taught, the more teachers were out there in that same position. And there's so much that we didn't learn in college, or they didn't learn in college when they were in teacher ed. And there's so much that there's to learn. On-the-job training seems to be the norm nowadays in education. So they need all the support they can get. All of them do. All teachers do. But especially those new teachers who are lateral entry. And that's where my passion is. So that's what excites me. And that's why I like working as an instructional coach. I get to really work with those and be there for them because there's a lot. As you have heard before, you don't know what you don't know. And that's challenging in education. That's a bad place to be in, but that's the way it is.
All right, so that's an awesome introduction. There's so many questions I want to ask you because I'm also into teacher training, teacher development. And here in Singapore, we have different programs for teachers. I came from the 4-year program, so I had a lot of training before I became a teacher. There are also teachers who got their degrees from the university and come in to get their diploma in education. So those get trained for like 1 year or 1.5 years, and then they go into schools. So we have different degrees, intensities of training. But I know that there is now worldwide a lot of places with teacher shortage. So what they do is that they want to try and cut down the training time so that they can give more teachers, push more teachers into the pool faster. Yeah, so then you will see more unprepared teachers or teachers who are less prepared to face the challenges. So with that in mind, what are the biggest challenges you've seen, right, for beginning teachers when they are first starting out their careers? so that we know what to address. If we are going to cut down, we need to know what's important.
Yep. It's a lot of challenges, but I think one of the biggest ones is not really being prepared for what all is expected of you. You can't just come in and teach your subject and be done with it. There's a lot of paperwork, and you've got to understand the behavior issues of students. You may have a classroom of 20, you may have a classroom of 35. So that's a big issue too. So how to handle classroom management is also hard to deal with if you haven't really expected it, because the thing you remember the most is what you went through when you were in school, if you didn't go through teacher education. And I can speak for myself. When I was in school, we didn't really have a lot of classroom management issues. But nowadays, and it could be for any reason. It's not necessarily a student is misbehaving or anything like that. They just may have challenges. You may have students with IEPs and those individual education plans where they've got this modification and that modification, and that's something that you don't know, especially if that wasn't you growing up. It's hard to understand how to handle that, especially if you've got 35 kids and 10 of them have all these modifications, and you have to incorporate that into your lesson, and you've got to differentiate your lesson, and you don't even know what your teaching style is. So teachers don't even know what their modification is. I'm gonna put it that way. So we've got to understand, how do I teach and how do my students learn, and how do we match that up? So that's a combination of challenges right there. So there's a lot more, and then it depends on the size of your school. I'm in a school where there's 2,000 students. So if you're used to a smaller school, that can be a challenge too. How do you handle that many people in one place? And what about duties? And there's just a lot going on in education, that when you're new, you don't even know where the copier is. Does it have a code? Do you have any copies? So there's a lot of, you need a support system. You really need a support system. And a lot of people are good. A lot of systems are good with mentors. It's just, do they have enough mentors? So that's another challenge, enough mentors for the teachers that you have coming in.
Well, that sounds like a lot of challenges.
It
And
does. I
it's a
hope I
lot
wasn't
going,
rambling,
yes,
but yeah, it is a lot.
a lot going on for teachers these days. Yeah.
Yes.
And you tied in something very nicely to something Dustin is interested in regarding the supportive environment, right?
Yeah,
So, Dustin?
absolutely. Yeah. And I couldn't agree more. There are so many challenges, and, you know, all teachers need so much support, but especially new teachers. I couldn't agree more with how little people are actually prepared going into the classroom when they come out of school. I was actually just having a conversation the other day with a teacher who's finishing up a program now, and we were talking about her student teaching experience and how she just wasn't ready for the types of classroom management that you need to have, and dealing with student behavior. And I said, yeah, because they don't really teach you that in teacher programs. They teach you how to lesson plan and how to think through your content. And they teach some strategies, but they never really touch on managing a classroom. And that's like focal point number one.
Mhm.
So I'm curious about how important you would say it is to have a supportive, how important a supportive environment is in fostering the growth and the confidence in beginning teachers.
Very important to have a good support system, because if you know that there's someone, like in my school, they know they can come to me and ask questions. If you know that it's okay to ask questions, and you've got somebody that you can go to get some answers, then that means the world to you. Because if you feel lost and isolated, then you're like, well, what do I do? This is not for me. You're just ready to give up. If you don't have a support system, and that's in any profession, but in education, it seems hard because they're coming at you from every angle. And if you just don't know what to do, and you're in a meeting and they're throwing out all these acronyms, and you're like, what are they talking about? I don't know what a 504 is. What is that? You're already lost. So at least there's a safe place to go. If there's a safe mentor or an instructional coach or assistant principal or something that someone you can go to and say, look, I don't know what's going on. Help me out. So if you've got someone you can go to that's reliable, and it's not just someone that, oh, they're going to run off to the principal and tell them that, I don't know what I'm doing.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a safe place. So you got to have a safe place, a good support system, and someone you're like, I can go to this person, tell them anything, and I know that in confidence. And then you feel better about yourself. And then the more you go to them, the less you'll need to later on.
Yeah, 100%. So you started to touch about, like, you're kind of talking about mentorships. So what role would you say mentorships or even colleagues as mentors play in creating that supportive environment?
Oh, mentorship is key. The strongest mentors, I believe, are the ones that are in the same content or very similar content as yours. At the high school level, it's a little easier than at the lower levels. But if you have someone that's in the same content or department area, you almost got an inside scoop on how to do things, and they know how the classes run, and this is what we do when students don't understand something. This is a good thing. If they're in the same department, they understand your struggle, so they know. And they don't have to necessarily be in the same department, but it's best, it's ideal. But sometimes you're a singleton out there and you're the only one that teaches that specific content. So you might be the only art teacher or music teacher or something like that. And if you can get someone in a similar department, that would be great. But as long as you have someone who's a veteran and that knows the ins and outs, and when we have duty, this is where you go, and you need to make sure that when you get in, you clock in, or whatever the system is, you learn the system, you'll do better. But if you have a good, solid mentor, kind of like what I was saying before, that's a good support system that, even if, what do I do when I need to be absent? You've got someone you can go to, or even when you just got to go to the restroom, you got somebody, you're like, what's the best plan? And how do I do this? Do I go between classes? What do I do? So a good, strong mentor that's personable. And I also let people know, if your mentor doesn't fit, if they've assigned you one, it's okay to ask for another one, because you don't want to be miserable the whole year and it's because you and your mentor don't get along for whatever reason. It's nothing is carved in stone. It's for your success and the success of the students. If you're miserable, your students are going to be miserable. So we don't want that to happen.
So
Yeah.
that's a very good example over there. For me, I keep it in. I don't leave my class no matter what. If I need to go to the toilet, I can go 2-3 periods later, because if I go now and I come back, half my class is going to be missing, and the other half is going to be climbing the ceiling or playing with the fans or something else. So yeah, these are the things that you have to handle with the job. So
Yeah.
tying up with that, you gave a lot of good examples of support for teachers in terms of the systemic support. What I've seen nowadays is a lot of teachers facing burnout, facing stress. How about emotional support? Where do they get that from for beginning teachers?
We have guidance counselors that are there for the students, but the guidance counselors are also there for teachers, for one, in the building, and so the social worker. But you've got to find a release. Where is your outlet when you need to wind down? What do you do? And you have to cut it off at sometimes. And one good thing about here at our school, if you're a beginning teacher, you're not required for any specific outside duties. I mean, you have game duty, but you don't have to be a coach or anything like that. So that's good, because that's added pressure. So my opinion is to use your time wisely as much as possible in school, because we have planning periods, to use that time wisely. So when the day is over, you go home. And I know a lot of people take work home, and that's a hard, I hate to say this, but I don't like taking work home. I like to get it done while I'm at work. So when I get home, my focus is on, I'm married and have kids, is on them. And then I got to take care of myself as well. And sometimes we put it on ourselves because we want to do everything perfectly. And there is no perfectly in education. There's not. So you have to be efficient in your time at school. I know sometimes when your planning period comes and you're tired and you're like, oh my gosh, I just want to sit here and do nothing and drink my coffee until my 45 or my 90 minutes is over. But that's the time that they give you to get your work done. So at the end of the day, when your end of your day is 2:30 or 3:30, you might stay an extra half hour to make some copies or something like that. But go home. You don't need to go home when it's dark. You don't need to do that. That will burn you out a lot. So if you got a lot of grading, you might have to modify how you grade. And every once in a while, that's understandable. There's some late hours at times, but you've got to cut it off. Because if you get sick, guess what? They're gonna find a replacement. I mean, that's the ugly truth of it. It might be hard for them, and it might take them a while, but they'll find somebody. And that sounds kind of cold and kind of harsh, but you got to take care of yourself. And when you take care of yourself, you're a better teacher for your students. So that's me. That's my belief, because health is important. We don't want anybody burning out, because you shouldn't be 30 years old and burned out and you've only been teaching 2 years. So that's very important.
Yeah,
But do you see a lot of that? For Dustin, when you were an administrator, and for Ginean, do you see a lot of teachers burning out in our profession?
Oh yeah.
Is it a professional hazard?
And they'll say it. I'm burned out. I'm tired. I don't know what to do. And they're the ones that take papers home and they come back loaded down and just frantic. And it takes a lot of organization. It can be done. And that's something that needs to be taught, because you don't know how to do that. You don't know how to manage, especially in English and stuff where you have a lot of writing and reading. That I was a math teacher, so I like cut and dry. I like cut and dry. I was like, it's wrong. This step is wrong. But when you've got to read a lot, you've got to figure out that I've got to modify this somehow. There's got to be a better way. And nowadays, homework is a coin toss. Some people give it, some people don't. Some people think a lot of it is needed, and some say, no, the kids have other things, and that they have challenges at home. And if you're the type that likes, this is an example, if you like homework, there's no need, like for math, there's no need to give 30 problems for homework. I say give them 3 to 5 maybe, because if they're doing it wrong, you don't want them doing it wrong 30 times. So that way you can redirect your teaching the next day. So whatever lesson, it doesn't have to be a lot. It's just to reinforce what you taught that day, and just realize that you're not the only class they had in that day. So if they've got homework in 5 classes, something's going to fall unless they've got a strong support system at home. So it just depends. That's the way it goes.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I understand what you're saying, because I'm the English teacher. I'm the one that has the tons of marking, and I'm bringing home work to mark. Yeah, especially when I was a beginning teacher. I guess a lot of beginning teachers, they have this superhero mentality, because I joined the profession to save these kids. So I must save these kids. Nobody must fail under me. So when one kid starts failing, it messes with your mind. So I'm not cut out for this job, Yeah, so it hurts your confidence. So what practical strategies can beginning teachers use then to build up their confidence in the classroom, given this superhero mentality that they have to be perfect?
Right. And it takes time, because even after you tell them, they still have, like you say, that superhero mentality. It's hard to break that when they come in thinking I've got to be up here from day one. But to build their confidence, you've got to know your environment, and that sounds very basic, but I believe the teachers need a tour of the building. You need to know where things are. Like I said, you need to know where the restroom is. You need to know where the cafeteria is, and you've got to make those connections, not only with your students. We know we have to build a relationship with our students, but you've also got to build a relationship with your colleagues. I say 2 of the most important people is that front receptionist and the custodian. You get to know them and you're good to go. You've got to build those relationships, and the guidance office. And another way you build your confidence is know your content, know what the county or the state wants of you, because you don't want to be teaching something that's not even required. It's like, but I like this topic, I like teaching this. If it's not a standard that they want you to cover, there's no need for you to waste your time. And unless if you have extra time and you can slide it in there and make some connections, that's good. But know your content, really know your content and what's expected of you, and how far can you go. It's good to be creative, it's great to be creative, and you should be, but you got to stay in the realms of this is going to be what they need next year or at the end of the year for their test or whatever your state requires of you. So know what's required, and even know what's required of you as a professional. Like we have to have so many continuing education credits to be certified.
Mm-hmm.
And you don't want to come up in 3 years and be like, oh, I've got to do that. I didn't know. I didn't know how to do that. So there's a whole lot again to know, but the little things, and that's something that you should learn from your mentor. When you sit down and say, okay, what's the most important? What is my year one? What do I really need to know to be successful? And not to worry about the huge things or the tiny things. Is what's the important things, because everything can seem, oh, I got to do this now, but no, not necessarily. So to build your confidence as a teacher is know your environment, get a good relationship with your students and your colleagues, and just know what's required of you. And if you can go above and beyond, that's great, but not to the point of, like we were saying, burnout.
I would add to that as well, because those are great answers, and say having a good classroom structure and remaining consistent with
Yeah.
your routines and your expectations
Mm-hmm.
can really go a long way in
Right.
confidence, because that sets the tone for that positive learning environment.
Mm-hmm.
And then which allows the teacher to be the teacher. And that alone is part of the building relationships with students and all that, which is all part also, I think, of building up that teacher's confidence.
Right. I agree with that. Like they're having set procedures and guidelines, then they know what to expect and be consistent. I agree completely, because when you're consistent, the students know, they know if you think they like somebody else or something, but if you're fair and consistent across board, it's a lot easier, and have a set procedure. That is so key. Yes, I agree.
Which is actually perfect, kind of leading into this next question, because in order to do all of those things, have those types of structures, know that content, know the expectations, all of it, right? It means that hot word, professional development, in some way, shape, or form is going to be needed. So how would you say professional development opportunities can help beginning teachers to start to feel more prepared and sufficient?
Well, for beginning teachers, I believe the professional development has to be really tailored to them, not just generalized, because just like students, if they don't see the importance of it, they're going to check out. So there are certain things that they need to know, like classroom management. You need to have a PD on that. You even need to have a PD on how to incorporate technology into your classroom. So that, because as a beginning teacher, whether you went to a college or for education or not, you may not know all the little things that are out there now, whether it's AI or not, that you can use to help you. And it's AI is not going to replace a teacher. It just can't, but it can help. So, and there's a lot of things that's been out for years, and we as veteran teachers almost take it for granted, and we're like, oh, that's old. And you have to think, oh, that's a new teacher. It's not old to them. They don't know anything about that. So that's a PD that we have also. So classroom management, technology, that kind of thing has got to be important to them and useful to them. Something that they can use right now. How does the evaluation work when the principals come in and evaluate? What is the purpose? What are they looking for? Even when I come in and observe, I'm not an evaluator. I'm in there to help the teachers so that they can be better. So when they do get evaluated, they're better prepared.
Mm-hmm.
So you've got to have something that is relevant for them. And strategies are good, but you just don't want to do too many strategies, because it's almost like walking into a big candy store. You just got too many options. You're like, what do I want? What do I use? What can I do? So I believe a few strategies at the beginning is a good PD. Whatever is your best practices, or your county may even have something that they require everybody to be doing for that year. And I also believe data is important, how to analyze data, because that's so important now, where we test, and we like, but what are you doing when you test the students?
Mm-hmm.
And not, I think I was looking at one of y'all's other podcasts about assessments, that every assessment doesn't have to be an end of a unit assessment. It can be a formative assessment. It's just little chunks, little things, and it doesn't have to be a sit down test or anything like that. It could be just as you walking around and evaluating what you talked about that day, what your lesson was about, asking the students, how do you understand that? Asking them questions, and that's how you get that's an assessment. That's all assessment is about, is just seeing what are they learning. That is what our main goal is. And I think how to analyze that in that sense is also a good PD to have.
Yeah, definitely. I agree with you. Another aspect of a beginning teacher's life is the role of reflection and self-assessment, not just assessing students, but assessing themselves. So I'm really interested to know, how do you develop a culture of self-assessment within your organization? That's one thing. And the second thing is, when you have a new beginning teacher come in, how do you get them into the habit of this culture and reflect upon their work? Because some teachers may think, oh, it's just a waste of time, I just want to keep moving forward, I don't want to go back. What's past is past. Yeah, but
Right.
how do we keep them learning about from the past? Yeah.
Right. I agree. Self-reflection is important. And you've got to look at the end of the day, we try to promote the teachers, or at least as the instructional coach, at the end of the day, look at your lesson and say what worked and what didn't work. And you have to look, if you've got several classes, you have to analyze each class differently, because it may work in one class and not another. So I think that's something you should do either at the end of the day, or maybe your planning period, or anytime available, you can. But you've got to look at, how did their lesson go today? And that's what that assessment, like during the class, you can go and sit down and realize, okay, they didn't quite get it, so I need to reteach this in another way tomorrow. And it doesn't have to replace your lesson that you already have planned, but if they don't get what you had that day, you've got to go back. And that's what that self-reflection is. And with beginning teachers, we have to still instill that into them early, so that they know the same principle. If they get that habit in early, great. Is that's part of their lesson plan. Make that a habit for them. What did your lesson do for the students, or how did it look that day for your students? So self-reflection is ideal as a beginning teacher, because if you start that habit early, the more they teach, it's already in there. They know how to do that. So that's very important, because if you just keep going and say, well, I taught my lesson, and then the kids are supposed to get it and I'm just moving on, that's a great disservice. You're hurting those students. So self-reflection is very important.
Oh, those are really powerful words. Yeah, you're hurting the students if you don't do self-reflection and make yourself better at overcoming those challenges.
Right.
Yeah, from an administrative point of view, Dustin, how do you turn this into a culture?
I think part of that also is reflecting based on what your students tell you. Giving students regular surveys to ask about their learning and what's working and what's not working, to be able to make those adjustments. But as far as making that a part of culture, I think it always starts at the top, right? Like, leaders need to be people who are reflective, and need to be people who are willing to both give and receive feedback and make adjustments. And the more that leaders and mentors, department heads, right, it all kind of trickles down, that the more that your administration models what they want to see from their staff, the more their staff will want to be a part of it. I know that I have done many things because of what I saw in a strong administration. So when I believed in my leaders, I wanted to, mimic what they were doing, even when I was just as a teacher. And then when I became an administrator, right, it was the same sort of thing. It's one-on-one conversations. It's having real conversations with people and not just talking about data and GPA and test scores. And I think it's all part of that fostering that kind of community within a school, is where you start to get people who are like, hey, these people all reflect on a regular basis. I can see the adjustments that come. I can see the way they change. I can see the way they continue to support us. I want to do the same sort of thing. And I think those are the types of things that bring out the best in people.
Absolutely.
So this has been a really fun conversation, is just really focusing in on first year, those beginning year teachers, because we really haven't really talked too much where we focus specifically on new teachers. And so this was a really nice conversation. Ginean, is there anything else that you would like to share or discuss regarding anything with supporting new teachers to be more like veterans?
It really hurts when you see good people leave the profession, and it really hurts when people just kind of blow it off. It's like, oh, we'll just see what happens. And I wish that there was something that we can do on a grand scale to get more teachers in. And I know a lot of people say, better pay and all that kind of stuff. And so how do we handle it when we don't have that kind of stuff? So we have to play the hand we dealt. And that's where I come in. I just really want to support beginning teachers. And I really, really have a heart for them. And I just wish that we had more out there for them. I wish we had more supplies. I wish we had, smaller classrooms because we've got a lot of huts at my school. So they're not even in the building. And the numbers, they're still having kids out there. So we're still going to be in the education business. And so I just think that if we just really continue to support teachers, that they'll stay, because most of them are in it because they have a desire to be in it. Nobody's really just doing, well, I just need a job, I think I'll go teach. There may be some, but the vast majority, that's really what they want to do. And it's sad that the pay doesn't line up and all that kind of stuff. And teachers are 2 and 3 jobs, that's hard to see. But while they're in that building, they need the support. And we know that people move and all that kind of stuff and things happen. But when they just leave because of, like we were talking about, burnout, that's kind of sad. And so we just need to continue to support beginning teachers and even veteran teachers, because they be in 20, 30 years and they get burned out too, and they leave early. And they may be 5 years from retirement and they just like, I can't take it anymore. And that's a sad state. So we just really need to support them and love on them and just show that there is hope out there. It's possible. It can be done. So, and then listen to the podcast like this and get some great information.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more with all of what you said. The support is the thing that is most lacking. Teachers don't get into teaching for money. Yes, it'd be nice to have better pay, but that's not why people get into it. It's a calling, and it is sad to see good teachers leave. And so it's funny because I'm like reflecting back on everything we've talked about today, and you kind of wrapped everything up perfectly there. And I'm realizing that we talked about helping beginning teachers and strategies that'll help beginning teachers, but a lot of what we talked about today will help veteran teachers too, because I think a lot of times when you do get into schools where there's good support, the focus becomes on beginning teachers. Just like in the classroom, we tend to focus on the students who need the most help. And oftentimes the students who excel get the least amount of help because they excel. But the truth is they need us just as much as the kid who's falling behind, right? And teachers the same. So I just love the way you said all that. It really wrapped everything up quite nicely.
Thank you.
So thank you so much for joining us, for your insights, your contributions. We really appreciate you being here and being with us and helping to support teachers here, as well as with everything that you are doing in instructional coaching. A reminder to our listeners, please like, subscribe, review, share our podcast, because we are here to have conversations like this with you and for you, because we love to support teachers. So thank you to everybody for tuning in and listening, and we will talk to you the next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody.
Bye.